I am a confidence coach and Santa Barbara local, but I didn't move here for school or partner or the weather. I'm here because one day, while I was still living in New York City, my mother called me and said, someone just knocked on my door and said, we want your house, all cash, as is, in a few months. What do you say? My mother wanted to take the offer, but didn't know how she could get rid of everything and find another place to live in that time. But in that moment, I said, why don't you take my apartment and I'll go to California and figure it out? Those words came out of nowhere. At that point in my life, I thought, I'm a New Yorker at heart. I'm gonna be here till I die. But when I said those words, I felt this gut intuitive yes, and all the hair on my body stood up. 2 months later, I'm in the airport in California with no job and no place to live. I decided to spend my first several nights camping out at a festival, thinking I would find my knight in shining armor, only to find knights dressed like Tarzan. By the end of the festival, I had officially begun my 18th quarter-life crisis. I fell back into a depressive episode and relapsed. I was severely bulimic and depressed within my first week of what I thought would be the last chapter of my life. I thought because I was following my joy and intuition that everything would effortlessly and miraculously fall into place, and it fell into pieces. I spent the following week with my sister's ex-boyfriend's mom in LA. Not my idea of the California dream either. From there, I decided I would go on a road trip to San Francisco, and maybe then my life would turn around. After what I thought would be a 2-day pit stop in Santa Barbara, I found myself on the side of the road with a totaled car. Chaos ensued, but eventually I created a beautiful life for myself in Santa Barbara. Yet after 2 years, I decided to leave the good life I had created in Santa Barbara for the great life into the unknown again. I left America to solo backpack the world, and after 5 months, I found myself in Vietnam, where I chose to spend the next 2 incredible years of my life. It is there I created some of my fondest memories and where I discovered my passion of being a stand-up comedian. But today, I am not here to make you laugh. I am here to help you change your life. How did I manage to do all of these things that at one point in time I thought were impossible for me? Through these risks came realizations. I discovered one of the keys to unlocking our fullest potential is to take risks in a way that will help us step into an alternative version of ourselves. Today, I will tell you the ideologies you'll need to know and the process so that you can take these risks in a way that will create a new life and a new you. What is a risk? You can call it a gamble, a bet, taking a chance, a leap of faith. You can call it whatever you want, but the process remains the same. Taking a risk is the process of creating. You cannot achieve what you want to do or who you want to be without taking a risk to get there. The changes that you want to see in your life begin with a desire that feels so far from where you are, like you're standing at the beginning of a convoluted maze, so uncertain, but leading you to where you want to be. In order to move through that maze with excitement and curiosity, you need to begin to step into a version of yourself that can reach those dreams. An alternative version of yourself is not pretending to be someone you're not. Spider-Man is always Spider-Man, but sometimes he calls himself Peter Parker when he's not dressed in a sexy red leotard. When you go to work, you clock into a work shift. You shift into the version of yourself that you need to in order to get that paycheck. You already have thousands of alternate versions of yourself. I can guarantee you're not the same person with your grandparents as you are with your friends from college. Both are still you. It's an alternate you. I asked people attending my workshop one day if they had any examples of alternative versions of themselves. One woman, a business owner and baker, spoke about how one day she was outside of a store selling her home-baked decorated cookies when along came Girl Scouts to sell their cookies. One of the mothers of the Girl Scouts was not thrilled about this and began to argue with the baker. Now, the baker who grew up in a bad neighborhood typically would have started to tie her hair back and take her earrings off. But she chose to handle the situation with poise and professionalism because she had stepped into an alternative version of herself that represented her business, which proves that different versions of ourselves can help support us in making better choices for our goals. So, where do we begin? First, let's talk about some of the challenges that block us from taking risks and changing. The big three are insecurity, fear of rejection, and lack of security. To get something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done, which requires a new you. Oftentimes, this is where imposter syndrome comes in. Imposter syndrome conjures a collection of feelings, including inadequacy, self-doubt, and fear of fraudulence. When you have these feelings of self-doubt or inadequacy, it is simply from being unfamiliar with that version of yourself. Carol Lieberman, a Beverly Hills author and psychiatrist, talks about how people experiencing imposter syndrome have an all-encompassing fear of being found out to not have what it takes. But what if I told you how and why we already do have what it takes? I'll tell you a secret. Every version of yourself that you will ever need, you already have access to. A version of you exists that sees fear as fuel to move forward and acts accordingly, regardless of if fear is there. If you can't beat the fear, just do it scared. One of our brain's main functions is to protect us from danger, which in many ways serves a purpose. You don't want to see a lion running towards you and go, "Oh, do boy, do." So, yes, it's a good thing. But taking a risk, which is a necessary part of creating a new you, produces fear. The more you consistently step out of your comfort zone and consciously create that fear, the more progress you will see in your life. In a study by Robert Yerkes and John Dudson, first published in the Journal of Comparative Neurology and Psychology, found that states of optimal anxiety can maximize performance levels in a way that comfort cannot. Simply put, fear can serve as fuel to growth. According to a study by Ayelet Fishbach and Caitlin Woolley, published by the Association of Psychological Science, they partnered with Chicago's Second City to conduct an experiment with over 550 students across 55 classes. They told the instructors to give the students one of two sets of instructions. One was to tell the class the improv exercise as one typically would. The other was to also add that the goal of the exercise was to feel awkward and uncomfortable. They found that seeking discomfort was motivating because it's a tangible feeling that can lead to goal progress. Woolley said instructing students to seek discomfort increased their risk-taking and persistence in the exercise. They learned more and made more progress. In another study, they found that people were more open to hearing another person's opposing views in conversation when told to seek discomfort, rather than when they were simply told to have a discussion about their opposing views. We can seek discomfort by putting ourselves in situations that put us at risk for rejection, which brings us to another block, fear of rejection. When I first settled in Santa Barbara, I was making minimum wage. So when I saw something I wanted, I would risk rejection by seeing if there was a way I could get what I wanted for free. One day, I walked into a fitness center, and when I asked how I could get a free membership, they said for a couple of hours a week, I could scrub toilets and mop floors in exchange for the $180 a month membership. I swallowed my pride and plugged my nose. Less than 1 year later, I became a fitness instructor there, free membership included, and got paid to do something I loved to do. Fear of rejection is a survival instinct. It's an evolutionary tool to alert humans who were at risk of being ostracized from the pack that we relied on for survival. Being rejected meant life or death. We live in a world today where there are so many resources, opportunities, and communities. Your feelings are valid, but know that you're going to be just fine if you don't get that job you really wanted, or if you don't hear back from Kyle that you met on Tinder. Reframe rejection as an opportunity for growth, no matter the outcome. Kyle was probably at that festival dressed like Tarzan. All of these fears that taking a risk entail require what psychologists call cognitive reframing. The premise of cognitive reframing is that our thoughts about our experiences drive our emotions, actions, and outcomes. In a study by Sean Locke and Ryan McKay at the University of British Columbia, they used cognitive behavioral therapy on people experiencing ECE, an exercise-related cognitive error. They found that when these individuals challenged and reframed their thoughts about exercise, they found more progress in their physical activity. The way that you want to feel in this new version of yourself is activated through action. We change when we take the risks to move out of an environment or pattern that continues to pull us back into the version of ourselves that we are ready to leave behind. The person you want to be, the things you want to have, and even the way that you want to feel is on the other side of risks. Whether it takes 2 years or 10 years, there's no right or wrong timeline to embody the version of yourself that you want to emulate. Every trial and error is helping to solidify the alternative you that is in the process of becoming. Waiting doesn't mean not doing anything. Waiting means taking action until something happens. Do things scared, keep going, and wait. If you take a risk and you think you failed, you just haven't waited long enough yet. I know that's not easy to say when you don't have security and you think time is running out. When I first crashed my car in Santa Barbara, I had nowhere to live. The money I had saved went from a security blanket to a broken parachute. I could feel myself falling into what felt like eternal doom. But I still held on to the hope that I would land on my feet. I didn't land on my feet. I landed flat on my face. But I waited as I continued to crawl forward and eventually got back up on my feet. That risk I took to move to California created a version of myself that was more resilient, independent, and trusting in my ability to move through turbulent times. It created a version of myself confident enough to eventually backpack the world alone with ease. Perseverance and assurance is the backbone of strong risk-taking. We have the ability and choice to create any alternative version of ourselves. We have all been given the gift of neuroplasticity, the nervous system's ability to create new neurological connections in the brain, to create new habits, behaviors, and ways of existing in our world. Rolf Ekman, a researcher based in the University of Gothenburg, discusses the best ways to create these new neurological connections in the brain based off of research spanning over a decade. Several ways to support this shift in cognitive behavior are repetition, autonomous decisions, learning new things, as well as challenges and optimism. Consistently choosing to take a variety of risks with excitement will create a new life and a new you. Knowing that we have the power to create a surplus of identities for a fulfilling life, why not see how many we can foster into alternative versions of ourselves that are merely waiting to be accessed? Hard work, discomfort, and uncertainty are unavoidable, but it's also essential for character development. These parts of life, including risk and fear, are tools to help build our story and the characters we will play in our lives. Every role is important and valuable. But remember, you don't have to audition for the starring role. You just have to risk stepping out from behind the curtain and rehearse. It's time to take these risks so that what's already inside of you can be experienced by you to create the performance of a lifetime. I want to leave you with a quote by Leo Buscaglia, which has stuck with me my entire life. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To hope is to risk pain. To try is to risk failure. But risk must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. Thank you.